recording. Right, we're recording. Cool.
All righty, we're gonna go ahead and get something started.
Okay, so how many of you guys prepared for your elevator testimony? And because I was.
Like nobody.
Who's afraid, scared to death that I'm gonna pick?
Pick Millie.
Really? Well, I'm not gonna pick any of you. I just wanted you to go through the assignment of actually having that, so that you can share your testimony. And a fairly quick, I got another testimony coming, so he gets more in 5 minutes, so. But everywhere, this is my coworker, Matt Tanner, he works with me out at the Air Force Academy. He flies all the airplanes that pull the gliders up in the air out there, and I'm the one that works on them when he breaks them, so.
Which has got to be less than most of the other guys.
That's correct, that's correct. But, so we are gonna talk about testimonies today. Is there anybody here that feels really confident and they do want to share their little elevator testimony?
I don't want to, but I definitely could.
Well, then, if you definitely could, you would, and you should. So finish your cookie and I'll let you go ahead and give yours. And you can just kind of stand up and give us a quick testimony and we'll go from there.
No pressure.
No pressure. And you can even have somebody sit in the elevator with you here or standing. You know.
Also, this is Mr. Matt. He will be giving his testimony
Would you mind if I took the elevator to the ceiling?
You can.
tonight. How many floors is it, Dad?
Well, it's a real slow one. Whenever you're ready.
All right. Have present.
Now push the button. Floor 120.
So where should I just like stand up there?
But if you want, you can sit right there if you want.
If you stand up, it would be easier for us to hear you.
Yes. No pressure. So, I'm homeschooled now, but when I was kindergarten and first grade, I went to public school at TCA. So, I really liked kindergarten. Kindergarten was great. I had a fantastic teacher, and that teacher was very constructive and really, she was a good kindergarten teacher. I entered first grade. The teacher looks nice, great. Like she's a great person out of the school area, and but I mean, I quickly realized that I'm little, so my emotions are a lot more fragile. So I'm starting school. Everything goes great. After a couple weeks, something feels off because she's been very strict, doesn't let anything fly at all. So some of us would start smiling and chuckling to ourselves a little bit sometimes, and she would get very, very angry. Sometimes she'd even take recess off of us and stuff. If we raised our hands when she was not asking questions and stuff again, she'd be very upset with us. And she got upset for the most trivial things out there. Nobody would ever get upset with those things, not even at a college level. I mean, if you raise your hand at the wrong time in college, nobody's gonna care. So it was really hard on all of us. And so I would come home every day. I was such in a bad state because I was constantly being yelled at. I was constantly being just put down in such a terrible way. And so my mom, she knew something was going on. So she went in to volunteer in my class for a little while. And she saw this, all the kids were really afraid of this lady. This one girl, she was she was talking to mom, she was petrified. She's whispers, she's I accidentally made him work on my paper, and my mom's because she was really scared that the teacher would get upset with her. So my mom's it's okay. She erased it and everything went well. So after she saw what was happening in there and the damage it was causing, she decided to pull me out because it was just terrible. for years after that, I could not write, I could not do math because I had become so blocked off to being able to do anything that I didn't believe I could. Because she never gave constructive criticism, she only gave grading criticism. And so it took, when I went to 5th grade, I went to public school again, just because my mom had just gotten a new job, and so we needed like that year to figure things out. And so that teacher in that 5th grade year was incredible. She was kind of like, she was really able to reverse everything that my other teacher had done, and she was able to like bring back part of me that actually liked school, and I was able to do it without feeling like I couldn't do anything correctly. And it was really kind of just God speaking and saying, you are not, because at that point I had consciousness and I was able to like, comprehend things. He was telling me, you're not something that is broken, that is not able to do anything correctly. You are what I've created. You are mine. And that was really, really good for me. Otherwise, I probably still wouldn't be able to like be as confident with a lot of things as I am. And some of it still carries over because sometimes I'm still really nervous with things I shouldn't be. Like I'll be doing simplest tasks, like even like doing school in a public place, and I'll be like so nervous because some of it just like carries over, and I don't want anybody to get upset. And it's all subconscious. Like I don't even know these things. So it was really great. It was really great for God to step in and just show me that.
Thank you.
So that's a great testimony of God's grace in his life. What are some other testimonies we can get? When you think about testimony, if you prepared your testimony, what is it geared towards?
Yes. Salvation.
Salvation, okay. And when I've been Christian for a while, but I would hear constantly for people that have been Christians for a long time, they would always sell themselves short. So you'd have somebody give a great testimony that someone has been in prison for 20 years and they came out and God just saved them from amazing things. You're fine. And a lot of people would be intimidated by that. And they say, I would say I was young, I don't remember much about it. And they think that's their testimony. It's not just that little part in life when you give your life to Christ. That's a huge part of it, but it's also just like he said, God's grace and God's mercy throughout life. And that's what makes us who we are as individuals. Who's got another idea besides, maybe some grace, some salvation? What else can you think of that would be a great testimony? Yes.
So I just have some thoughts off of that. I think your testimony never ends because you're always growing and changing, and God is working different ways in your life. And so like 2 years ago, if you asked me my testimony, I would have been like, oh yeah, like grew up in a Christian home, I've known God my whole life, that's kind of it. But since then I've grown so much. And so
And if you were in an elevator with that testimony, what do you think that person next to you would have been doing?
probably
Door open, door open.
but I think it's much cool because it continuously changes until
Yes.
you die. It never stops.
Great, yes.
There's the element of salvation, and then there's sanctification. So there's the continuous process of
Yep.
Jesus making us more like him. So our testimony is God's work in our life, and that does include the initial, I accept Jesus into my heart.
Yes.
It also includes and I give him control, and he did this in my life, and I realized this about him, and I grew in my relationship in this way with him.
Awesome. Great answer. Anybody else have anything to add to that?
I have one thing to add. Just real quick to that part. If you've grown up in a family that loves the Lord, man, that is the Lord's blessing. I remember when I was maybe your age thinking like, oh man, I don't have this story. Like all these people share how things were horrible. And then there was this moment or thing or event. And then after that, the Lord was really blessing them. And so I kind of felt like, oh man, my story is not that cool or that interesting. And so I don't want anybody who is a child of the King to go around thinking that their story is not awesome. And the fact that, if you've grown up in a family that loves the Lord, then that is the Lord's blessing on you, that you don't even know what it's like to not have the love of the Lord. And so that's my encouragement. Never to be afraid of your story, your testimony. So there you go.
I just wanted to add, like a tiny bit that he said, don't be afraid of your story or your testimony. I just thought, because God gave it to you for a reason.
That's right.
He gives each of us our own story for a reason.
And God gives each of us a specific testimony. So when we do, I keep using this person in the elevator, when you meet that person in the elevator, it was God putting you in that position and that person in position to hear your story. So that's what and it's something maybe I couldn't have done it or anybody else. So on that note, I have Matt here. He's gonna give us a little bit of testimony of God's grace and mercy in his life. And
Do you want it
I'll
first
let
or
Matt take
after?
Kind of in the middle. Cool. That's all right with you. So, hey, thanks you guys for letting me be here. My name is Matt Tanner. And I want to give my testimony, share with you what the Lord did for me. It was 7 years ago this month that I was in an airplane accident that I should have died. And just to give you a little bit of backstory on my career and whatnot, as I became a pilot as a teenager. When I was 18, I got my pilot certificate. I thought that it was the coolest thing ever. And then went to school, got an aviation degree. Along the way, got interested in doing aerobatics, where you're flying upside down. And so I did aerobatic competitions and air shows and things like that. Flew in formation with other airplanes doing aerobatics. That's where you're flying, 10 feet apart, doing all kind of cool stuff. And so that was something I really immersed myself into. I was really proud of my ability. I realized that the Lord had given it to me, but I'm sure that I had more confidence than I needed. And it was a neat time in life, but that was kind of one of the things I prided myself on was aircraft control, right? Being able to make the airplane do what I wanted it to do. I went on to teach aerobatics and whatnot. And so anyway, that was something I felt like I was really good at. That was in my wheelhouse, this is the thing that I'm really comfortable with, going upside down and doing all kind of stuff that most people consider crazy. And so kind of fast forward a little bit, I'm in with our church. I was one of the winter camp counselors, had at the Frontier Ranch near Buena Vista, and had a guy in my cabin, and he was kind of a shy person and wanted to kind of reach out. And so afterwards, I had offered, I was like, hey, if you ever want to go up flying, let me know. And so he took me up on the offer, which surprised me because I had made that offer lots and lots of times. And most of the time that's where it ends. But hey, he took me up on it. So it's like, let's make it happen. So it was actually 7 years ago this month. And so we rented a little airplane from the airport out in Falcon. And we rented a plane that I had flown before, but didn't have a whole lot of time in it. So we're going up, and he's sitting right next to me, closer than Mike is to me. We're touching elbows,
Airplanes are like
yeah. And so we're having a great time. So we flew out over Rampart Reservoir, and his parents lived, he lived just on the south side of the academy. So it was a lot of fun. We were beautiful day, and he was videoing and whatnot. So towards the end of the flight, I asked him if he wanted to do some maneuvering. And so where we're just do some basic stuff that you learn as working on your private pilot certificate. And so we're doing some steeper bank turns and some stalls and whatnot. And so I'd been talking through some of the things that we were going to be doing. And so, and we were about to wrap the flight up and head back, and we're less than 10 minutes away from the airport. And so the last maneuver that we ended up doing was what's called a power on stall. So that's where you leave the throttle at full, and it has nothing to do with the engine stalling. So like if you're a car stalling, then that's where the engine might stop. But in this case, it refers to the way the air flows over the wings. And so in a stall, you're just going to be descending. You can't hold your altitude and stay level. So it's a maneuver that everybody practices when they're working on their pilot license. And so we did this. And so the airplane immediately, the left wing dropped off, And so it started into a spin. And so if you've ever seen like a maple seed, right? You throw it and it kind of spirals down. So that's kind of what an airplane looks like from the outside. That would be called a spin. And so we go into a spin. So now remember I mentioned the aerobatic part. So the airplane goes into a spin. I've been in thousands of spins in my life, in my career. And so at first it's like, no big deal. We'll just go ahead and I'll let it go around a time or two. We'll come out of the spin. No big deal. It's not something that we set out to do, but here we are. So not a problem. Well, so we go around about 2 rotations. So 2 360-degree turns. And then I start to put the spin recovery flight control inputs in. So not that it makes that much of a difference, but you bring the throttle back to idle, you put your rudder pedals to neutral or in the opposite direction of spin. So we're spinning to the left. So that means that the ground is going from our left to right. So we're turning to the left. And then you put the control stick in the middle. And absolutely nothing happened at all. We just continued to turn. And it was also a pretty flat spin. So just to give you some reference. So normal spin, your nose is going to be kind of in this attitude below the horizon. An accelerated spin, it's going to be a little bit steeper. And a flat spin, your nose is going to be a little bit closer to the horizon, like almost level. And so that's what was going on for us. We were in a really flat spin. And the airplane should have responded fairly quickly. Within another turn or two, we should have stopped. And I should have mentioned we were about 4,700 feet above the ground. So we're about 11,700 feet above sea level out over Black Forest. And this is plenty of altitude to recover. So here we are, we're spinning. I start to realize, oh no, this is not responding the way I want it to respond. We turn another time or two, the engine stops. So the propeller stops. That has to do with that particular engine and the gyroscopic precession. It had a really lightweight propeller. And I could go into that. But anyway, so now the propeller stops and I'm thinking, oh, great. Now I got to get out of the spin and restart the engine. So we are continuing to turn, continuing to go down. We were spinning pretty fast. So it was about 2 seconds per turn. So every second we're turning about 180 degrees. And so, by this point, I realized we are 10, 12 seconds into it. And I realized like, this is not going well. And so I called out to Jesus. I got to the point where I reached the end of my abilities, like, this is not something where I'm freezing up and I just don't know what to do. This is a situation where I know exactly what's going on. I am very clear-minded. This is the thing that I'm good at and nothing's happening. We're not recovering. So I realized pretty soon into it that this is it. We're not going to make it. And when I say we're not going to make it, what I mean is I've studied spins a lot. I've watched videos of every spin I could get a hold of. I've known people who have spun all the way into the ground and died. Nobody makes it. Okay. That's not something that you're like, maybe things will be okay. This is like, oh, these are the last things I'm ever going to see. This is the guy that I'm dying with. My kids are going to grow up without a dad. And it was the worst. It was the worst. And, and so, like I mentioned before, I reached the end of my abilities. I got nothing left. He definitely has nothing left. He's never even been in an airplane before, And so, I cried out to Jesus. I said, Jesus, help us. And Isaac says, by this point, he's looking back on it now. Obviously, we're here, but looking back on it now, he thought I was joking around. I was trying to mess with him, which was not the case. But then he realized that it was pretty serious, and he asked me if he should brace. And so that'd be like, there's really nothing to brace for. We're about to be, a puddle on the ground. And so I just said, we're going to die. And you can, so I actually have a video of it. I'm gonna show you here in a minute, and you can hear my frustration in the video. And I'm just kind of yelling because I'm just sad and angry. I was mad. Like, Lord, this is what I'm good at. Like, you gave me this ability and now it's gone. So Isaac begins to pray. Isaac, if I didn't mention this, it was his name. He begins to pray. He was thinking about his camera, so that he was wearing, and I wasn't. So he's actually starts saying his goodbyes to his family. The only other thing that I really said, right before we hit the ground, I called, I just said my family. I was really distraught. That was the saddest thing, knowing that my kids weren't going to have a dad. And we fell for 1 minute and 17 seconds, and then hit the ground. And in what I can only describe as like the most violent crash like I've ever experienced. Thankfully, it didn't last too long. But I remember thinking, like, in the moment, so here we go, the trees are coming up. And I remember thinking, as soon as the impact is happening, like, I'm still alive, right? Like, I could tell that I was somersaulting. I actually thought it was forward, turns out it was backward. But I just remember thinking in that moment, which I mean was less than a second, like, I'm still experiencing things, and I think I'm still here. We're okay. So we actually hit the ground where on this creek bank. It's called Kettle Creek, runs through Black Forest. If you guys know where La Forêt is, it's off of Shoup Road. It was on that piece of property, and so we hit the ground and then immediately began like a backwards somersault, so to speak. And we came to rest upside down. And when we came to rest, the canopy, because it's side by side, there's a low wing, so the canopy, plexiglass is over us. Excuse me, was busted up, and dust was everywhere, all in our eyes, hair, ears, everything. And I just remember that was the most shocked I've ever been in my entire life. Was, we're not dead. Like, I can't believe we're still here. And I said, we're alive. We both were, saying, thank you, Jesus. And so then, I mean, that was, I can't even begin to describe that shock, that we weren't not even injured. And so, as I mentioned before, I've known people that have been in crashes. And so I've even known people who lived through a crash only to die in the fire afterwards. And so I knew we had to get out quickly. So we were actually able to continue breaking the plexiglass. We were able to get out. The only injury that I got was my shin right here hit the dashboard as we hit upside down. And it's just my right shin, because I was doing this number, putting my right rudder in. And that's the only injury that either one of us, I had to get 6 stitches. That's it. We both walked away.
6 stitches or that?
Yeah. And so I want to talk a little bit more about it, but I'll show you the video of it real quick first. But I just want to kind of give you an idea of what you're about to see. So it was over a minute of us knowing that this is it. We're dead. So anyway, do you want?
You can go for it.
Okay, great. All right. So the sound that you'll hear is the beeping sound, is the stall warning horn. So it was there, and you get to experience it, but unfortunately it's kind of loud. But yeah, so here we go. Yeah, so this was to be 7 years ago on the 29th. This is just before, and I'm kind of explaining to him what we're about to do. I'm sitting on the left, he's on the right with his GoPro on his hat. So now we're in the spin, and it's right about here that I begin to recover, try to recover. And you see the propeller stopped.
race. We're gonna go. What? Jesus. Jesus. Help us. Jesus. Forgive me, my. Take me to heaven, Lord. Forgive me, my family. Please forgive me my sins. I love you, Mom. I love you, Dad. I love you, Mom. Please. I love you, Emma. Grandma, Grandpa, my family. Grayson, Hagar, everyone. We live. Thank you, Jesus. You live. Come here. Oh my gosh. Isaac. Oh my gosh. You need to get out. Okay. Oh my gosh. Thank you, Jesus. Oh my gosh. Oh, Isaac. I'm so sorry. You're fine. Isaac, I'm so sorry. You're fine. Isaac, no, don't. Do not worry about it. You're fine. Okay, you need to get out. Yeah. Oh, Isaac. Oh my God. You're good. You're okay. You're okay. Get out. You okay? Yeah, I'm fine. You need to get away. I got your feet off. Now. The legs start. Okay, good. Oh, holy crap. You want to say this with the trees?
We didn't hit the trees.
Oh my God, watch your block, watch your block. Watch your back, watch your back. I can't believe I didn't get out. I thought, oh my gosh, I thought I was gonna die. Why is it? I'm so sorry, man. Okay, give me a hug. Give me a hug. Oh.
There's just a couple other pictures of looking at the airplane from the outside of it.
Wow.
That's what it looks like when we're done. That's the engine right there.
So what was it that stopped your descent?
So that's a good question. So this little hill right here that went up, I mean, you imagine if you hit on anything flat, I mean, that's it, right? Yeah, so the hill kind of is a creek bed. It kind of went up at like, maybe a 45-degree angle for a little bit, and then it was vertical for about, I don't know, 5 or 6 feet. There was like a little bit of a cliff. And so what happened was the nose comes around and we hit right there with the engine basically hit where this little outcropping was. So there's like forest up here and then this little cliff and then the creek. And so we hit that. So the engine breaks off. And then we started kind of rolling backwards on the slanted part, and the tail was, so now the nose is gone. Now the tail's all crunched up. And then we ended up hitting upside down. And I can tell you, I can go into more detail than that, but I can tell you why we're here, or not why, but what happened. Okay. But I can't really explain the why without telling you about Jesus, And so, like that's one of those things like, we're here as long as the Lord wants us here. And what I've walked away with from that is there's nothing more important in your life and my life than a relationship with Jesus. And so Isaac actually went back to school the next day. So he was his senior year. And I was like, man, he's got like a 4.0 and like he was a really good student. And I'm like, man, if there was ever, it was the end of the school year almost. And
What'd you do yesterday? Oh, I almost died.
right. So I was like, man, if there was ever a day to take off, you could have taken the day off. But he's like, no, I got to go in and tell people about Jesus. And he was a fairly shy guy, didn't like speaking in front of groups or anything. And he was like, hey, I got to stand up in front of each one of my classes. My teachers gave me a few minutes at the end, beginning. And he's like, I told over 100 people about Jesus. And I was like, well, that's awesome. And so, that's my encouragement to you is to not care what anybody thinks when you share your relationship with the Lord with them. Our job is to point people to Jesus, is not to care what people think about us. I mean, if they think that you're awesome, that's great. If they think that you're not awesome, then that's great. Our job is to love our neighbor. And so, also the other thing is, and I kind of alluded to it a minute ago, was, that was the thing that I thought that I was really good at. Okay. And so the Lord basically said for a minute and 17 seconds that I gave you that ability, and now I'm going to hold on to that for the next minute and 17 seconds. And you know, what the Lord gives us, he can take it away. But that was that, you know, I had nothing left at that point. That's where I turned to Jesus. And so yeah, I mean, we spun 59.5 rotations from 4,700 feet above the ground. And it's, you know, it's a miracle that we're here, and his family was kind to me way more than I deserved. And, you know, so I really like to share my testimony, because if it's encouraging, or if it encourages you to talk to other people about your relationship with the Lord, you know, that's what I'm here for. So anyway, does anybody have any questions? I'm happy to answer anything if you got it. But so his birthday was like the week before, and so he had just turned 18. And so we were on the news that night, and they said on the news, they said 2 men walk away from an airplane crash, blah, blah, blah. And I called him the next day, and I was like, "Did you see the news?" And he said, you know, he's like, "Oh yeah." He goes, "They called me a man." I've never been called a man before, because he was 18. So that was the first time he was ever called a man. So, but yeah, so he, yeah, it's definitely given him, it's definitely encouraged him. Yeah, I mean, as I said before, you know, our relationship with the Lord is the most important thing. And, you know, so for me, coming away from that, you know, that's what is I feel like I have a whole lot more peace. You know, I don't know that I was a big warrior before, but I'm kind of like, you know what? I'm not so worried now. And my mom actually even said, she's like, "Matt, I used to worry about you, you know, when you were going to go fly at all, and then you're going to fly by yourself, and then you're going to fly at night, and then you're going to go cross country flights, and then you're going to go upside down." And then like, there was all these worries along the way. And then, you know, she told me after the accident, she's like, "No, I'm not worried anymore," you know? So, you know, my encouragement to you would be, you know, hey, turn to Jesus first. Don't let Jesus be a last resort, you know? So anyway, but thank you guys for letting me share. So, oh yeah, go ahead.
So I have a question and
Yeah.
and a comment.
Uh-huh.
First one was, how long did it take you to fly?
That's a good question. So I called my boss the next day, and I was like, "I'm taking the next week off." And he said, "That's cool. You can take the rest of the month off," which was 2.5, 3 weeks, something like that. So it was about 3 weeks later that I actually started flying again, right at the academy in the Cubs. And the reason why, which thanks for pointing it out, the reason why it happened, okay, you're like, "Well, if you were so great," well, the Lord is great. But it's the tail, that the way that, and we have to go into all the detail, but the way that the tail was designed is not an aerobatic airplane. And so the horizontal tail surfaces were behind and below the rudder. So in a spin, your rudder's your effective control surface. And so that's what you should be using to get out of the spin. And so because of the way we were falling like this and not like this, the wind is basically being blocked by it would have been flowing over the rudder. You know, like you ever been riding in a car and you stick your hand out behind the side mirror and it feels like, oh, it doesn't feel much. And then you're, oh, there's the air, there's the wind. Okay, that's kind of what was happening to my tail. And so that's why I had no rudder control. But to your point, first of all, I knew that the Lord had saved us, right? So what am I afraid of? And I knew that I understood the physics of what was going on. And so, you know, not only am I here as long as the Lord wants me here, also the Cub is a whole lot better than that stupid airplane we were flying. So don't ever go flying in a Go Bosch, everybody. But anyway, but what else?
The comment I had is just that I've had a challenging life just repeatedly, just throughout life. But it's slower. Your experience happened in less than 2 minutes.
Right.
And so I'm alive kind of makes sense. But it dawned on me, I'm alive. And I think, How many of
Yeah.
us have been through rough circumstances and just because it didn't happen all at once and it wasn't this sudden realization, you've been pulled through.
Praise the Lord.
I'm alive.
Mhm.
Like, you're alive.
That's an awesome point. I'm, you could say, oh, you're here because the Lord's, saved you from a plane crash 7 years ago. Yeah, guess what? Everybody's here because you have air in your lungs and your heart is beating, and that has nothing to do with you. That has to do with Jesus. Okay. He's the one that sustains us. And so it's easy, like to your point, it's easy to look at one specific thing and go, there's a thing, and let's pay attention to that. But every day is an opportunity to go, thank you, Lord, for today, and thanks for the way I've been blessed, and so anyway, thanks. So yeah. That's a good question. I think that Isaac has flown on a commercial airliner, not on a small plane.
And he
I
doesn't
felt
bring his
really bad.
GoPro.
Not only did I feel bad about, what I thought was going to be killing the guy next to me, I was like, this is first, whatever. This is the worst,
Yeah.
But yeah, on an airliner, but he didn't like it. So anyway, yeah. Anything else? All right. Well, I'll be here for a few minutes after too, if anybody thinks of it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Matt.
Mhm.
I think the Zooming's about to end, and I'll turn it back on and we can go into some worship.
Actually, you have a reminder.
I do have a reminder. That's right. So if you are staff and you have any siblings that are going to be campers, please do remember to register them before this Sunday. And make sure,
Complete the registration.
yes, to complete all the registration, yes.
Is all registration for all campers? So I know like this little girl, she's like my sister, but she's not, but what registration do? Like all together.
Okay, registration for returning families happens for a week before we open it to everybody else. That week ends on Sunday. So the registration has to be complete by then.